Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. On the 22nd of May, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak surprised the country, calling for early general elections in less than 2 months. Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, he said, ending months of speculation. Soaked in rain, Sunak made the big announcement outside his 10 Downing Street residence. The UK Prime Minister said he will fight for every vote to prove that only a Conservative government led by him can bring economic stability to Britain. Soon after the announcement, Rishi Sunak and his Labour Party opponent Keir Starmer hit the campaign trail. At an event, Starmer said that only Labour Party can stop the chaos. He also said his party is only making commitments they know they can fulfill. Meanwhile, the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy has written to Rishi Sunak expressing concerns about threats to the election. The committee says the UK government should be prepared for the possibility of foreign interference during the upcoming general election. This could include cyber attacks or other activity. Joining me now to take this discussion forward is Nigel Fletcher, political historian at King's College London, and Beth Mann, spokesperson of YouGov.uk. Beth, let me begin by asking you, now that the elections have been called by Rishi Sunak, where do his popularity ratings stand? It seems that Sunak believes that the economic recovery could improve the chances of the Conservative Party. But what do your latest polls actually say?
Well, they certainly don't suggest that so far. Currently, Rishi Sunak is very unpopular. We have 70% saying they have an unfavourable opinion of him, and that's been like that for a long time now. And if we look at voting intention, the Conservatives really don't seem on track to win. Labour, the opposition, have a huge majority, a 25-point lead, and that lead has been sustained for a year and a half now, and it hasn't shown any sign of changing since the election's been announced.
Right. Let me go across to Professor Nigel. Professor Nigel, it was widely believed, even within the Conservatives, that this would be an autumn election in the UK. But this has now been preponed to the 4th of July. It seems there is some confusion as to why this happened, and many are upset with Rishi Sunak itself. But there must be a circle of advisors who felt that this is a better chance. Do you think this could in any way improve the chances of the Conservatives at all?
Well, I think what it reflects is that they've come to the conclusion that things were not going to get any better. The reason that people thought that they might play it long and go towards the autumn, or even as late as the end of the year, the latest it could be was January of next year. The reason that people thought they might play it as long as that was because things have been so bad for them. You've just heard from Beth there that the polls are absolutely terrible for the Conservatives. And so there was a view that perhaps things couldn't get any worse, and the only way for them was to go up, that they might get better with some better economic news, perhaps, with people starting to feel a bit more better off as you went through the year. That might help. But I think they've come to the conclusion that there is probably more of a risk that things would get worse as the year went on. But it's a little bit puzzling why he's chosen July. There was some speculation earlier in the year that if he wanted to go early, he could have had it in May at the same time as the local elections that took place across the UK. So no one was really expecting it to be on this date. But I think it seems to reflect a conclusion that this really is as good as it's going to get for the Conservatives. And as we've just heard, that's not very good at all.
All right. Beth, returning to you. Now, in terms of the key issues important for the voters in the UK, how do they think the Conservatives have performed when it comes to economy? Rishi Sunak's government is saying that the inflation rate has come down significantly. They're out of recession. Are these things being seen positively by voters in your polls or not at all?
Again, unfortunately not. And the economy is something that people do typically look at the Conservatives to be good at handling. But over the last year and a half, last 2 years, there has been nothing positive seen in the population's eyes. We're seeing people saying they're handling the economy badly, health really badly, immigration badly, housing. In fact, there's not really an issue that people see that they're handling well. And as you can see, they are the concerns that people are looking at them to solve. And I think that's why the polls are showing what they're showing, because they're looking at the Conservatives and saying they're not handling any of these well. And they're hoping that that change in government might mean a change in direction and hopefully some hope for them on the issues they care about.
Right. Professor Nigel, coming back to you, what do you think will be the Labour Party's alternative that they will offer in terms of the economic footprint, the economic roadmap and blueprint for the UK economy?
Well, I think what Labour are offering, first and foremost, is reassurance. They've been very clear in recent months and indeed in recent years that they're not going to promise to spend large amounts of money. They recognise the fact that the economy has not been in a good place. And they've been very keen to convince voters that they're exercising the sort of fiscal discipline that, frankly, they didn't have under Jeremy Corbyn, the previous leader, who was seen as being someone who was much more careless about the public finances, who wasn't trusted by voters on those issues. With the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in post, she has kept an iron grip on spending commitments and tried to convince voters that she will manage the economy in a very robust way. It's always been a problem for Labour governments in the past and for the Labour Party that they have always had this weakness on the economy. And so the fact that, as we've just heard, the Conservatives have lost that advantage is a significant moment. And it does make their prospects of winning the election that much greater. It's one of the significant factors underlining their support. Whether they'll find things more tricky in government is another matter, but they are first and foremost offering the slogan of change, but at the same time they're convincing voters that they're not going to be extreme, they're not going to take reckless risks with the economy, and they're pointing people back to what happened 2 years ago under the very brief premiership of Liz Truss. And that was something which harmed the Conservatives' prospects and looks to have completely annihilated their reputation for financial competence.
Right. Beth, returning to your polls at YouGov, when it comes to the popularity of Keir Starmer, you say that his popularity isn't very great either, but people see him as a better prime ministerial candidate. What are his ratings right now as a leader, as a prime ministerial face compared to Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, so his favourability isn't as low as Sunak's. I wouldn't say he was popular. We still have 50% having an unfavourable opinion of him. And when we do ask specifically, is Keir Starmer ready for being Prime Minister, we still find people quite split and actually leaning towards no. And yet they do think it's very likely that he will be Prime Minister. And if you look at the favourability of the Labour Party in general, that is better than Starmer's. So it's perhaps not that people are voting for the Labour Party because they see him as a good leader, but because they want the Labour Party more generally and want what they stand for and want that change.
Right. Professor Nigel, when it comes to the approach towards India, interestingly, last year we had seen the Indian government actually reach out to the Labour Party to discuss the FTA. And in a way, within Indian quarters, there was actually no worry about the FTA getting delayed because there was some hope that they might get a better deal with the Labour Party. Could that be true?
Well, I have to say that's sort of outside my my area of expertise. But one thing that it does show is that when a party is as far ahead as the Labour Party is, you do start seeing people recognising them as the next government, and that's been the case for a long time. And we've seen governments around the world actually starting to put out the feelers to talk to the Labour Party, and they've been very keen to talk to them in the expectation that they will be the government. And so that does change the way the party behaves. It makes them much more focused on the fact that they are going to have to look at challenges like this. And of course, as you say, around the world, other governments will be looking not at the internal politics of the UK and analysing every bit of the election. What they'll be interested in is what is the Labour government going to do for them in future. But it's quite telling that that is the way people are thinking, and it's the way they've been thinking for some time.
Right. Beth, returning to you, what is the number one issue, according to the people that you have surveyed and spoken to? What would be some of the top 2 or 3 issues that you've come across?
Yeah, so we actually regularly ask the people of Britain what their top 3 issues at the moment are. And consistently, the economy and health are coming up top. And at the moment, immigration is a really big one. It is slightly different when you look at Conservatives versus typically Labour voters. The Conservatives really are focusing on immigration at the moment. And Labour tend to think things like housing and the environment are important. So it will matter which ones the leaders are focusing on. But the economy and health is something that unites the electorate across Britain.
All right, Beth and Professor Fletcher, thank you very much for joining us on Global Eye, giving us your view on where we stand with the UK election. It's definitely a poll we'll be watching out very closely for. And India, of course, in the middle of its election process and 10 days for counting in India. Thank you very much, Professor Nigel and Beth, for joining us once again. We're heading into a short break right now on Global Eye, but coming up in a major ruling that has a global impact, the International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to halt its attack on Rafah. A discussion with former diplomat KP Fabian and human rights lawyer Lissandra Novo when we return.